Okay, so we're back. Better than ever, new and improved, whatever I guess you want to call it. What this video is going to talk about is a concept called list comprehension. Now, we've talked thus far about how we can create lists the manual way, meaning we type them in as we create them. We also looked in the last video about doing using some methods like .append, .index, .insert, .removed, and or .remove. Sorry, not removed. Remove, and those allow me to manipulate lists. Now, we can also do something called list comprehension. Okay, what list comprehension is, it's a really nice, neat, concise way that we can build a list. Okay. Let me give you a for example. We know that we typically can build lists, and don't worry, I'll bring this stuff back up for you to see. We can do something like this: 4x in range of I don't know, 10. Okay, and then we do like number list dot append x, right? And so we create our number list here, right? And what this will do is this will build us a number list from 0 to 10, okay? So what we typed here is equal to this statement right here, okay? Those two will do the exact same thing, okay? So whether I do this or I do this, I get the same exact result. And as you can see, this statement here is much more concise than this. I go from 1 to 3 lines of code to just 1. So, how does that work? Well, let's talk about it. So I'm going to get rid of this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a minute here to type in this program. There's several different list comprehension techniques I've used here. So I'm going to go ahead and allow you to pause the video here in a moment. Go ahead and type in all the code that goes from here all the way down to my primes. Go ahead and you can pause the video and type that in. We'll come back and I'll let you type the rest of it in, and then we'll talk about it. So go ahead and pause the video and you can type this in, and then we'll move forward. All right, so now that you got that typed in, let's go just this last one here. It's just this extra one line down here. It starts with prime. So go ahead and type that in, and then we'll discuss them. All right, so what we've got here with our list comprehension, okay, what you have is you can do an expression. In this case, we've got our x, and then a for item in some list or in a range or whatever. That's what our for is. Now, you can have none of them or you can have a bunch of them, okay? And we'll look at how we can have multiple fors in there. And then we can also have some kind of conditional. So we can put an if statement in if we want to. And again, I'll show you how to do that, all right? So the idea is you have an expression, some kind of for, right, and some kind of iterable, and then potentially an if. Now, again, you don't have to have the if condition. You don't have to have the for condition. It makes sense to, but you don't have to. So let's take a look at some examples. In this case here, I have a variable called number list, and we're going to create a list that will be from numbers 0 to 9, actually, because the way the range works, right? So we have our expression. We're going to say 4x in range of 10, okay? So that means it's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then 9 will be the last one. And what it does is essentially it does an append to this list for us, but it just does it really quickly inside of here. Well, what does it append? Well, it actually appends this expression, okay? So basically I'm saying for x in range, right? So it's going to go 0, and it's going to basically say, all right, append x to this list. That's kind of how, well, I mean, not kind of, but that's how it works, right? So we're going to iterate through this range. Every time we do, x is going to become 0, all right? Append it. 1, append it. 2, append it. And all the way through until it gets to 9. Because remember, with the range, we go up to 1 less than that number. Down here in our squares list, we do something a little different, okay? We're going to iterate through the same range, but this time our expression says x double multiple of 2, which means we're essentially going to square everything, okay? Now, you could do x times x, but what happens? Well, you have 10 times 10, 1 times 1, 2 times 2, 3 times 3. That's the same thing as squaring it, right? You're multiplying it by itself. So you could do that if you want to. This here just makes it easier so people know exactly what you're doing. But what happens, again, this is our expression, right? And this is our for loop. So again, we're going to iterate through, right? 0 through 9, because we use 10. So the first time x is going to be 0. And then basically it uses this and appends it. So 0 times 2, 1 times 2, right? 2 squared, 3 squared, 4 squared. It's going to do that every time and append it to this list. Okay, so again, this is our loop. This is our iterable. This is our expression that's going to be appended to the list. Down here, we haven't talked about this yet, this dot upper. But I just wanted to show you an easy way you can use a method. Now, what dot upper does is it will take a string and convert it to uppercase, is what it does. And we'll talk about string manipulation eventually, but that's really what this does. So essentially, I'm going to iterate through this list of letters. So for x in A, B, and C, right? So the first time x is going to be A, and it's going to say, okay, take that and make it uppercase. Once that's done, append it to the list. And then the same with B, same with C. So we've got our expression. So here, we're not using range, right? We're not using range. We're iterating through a list. And that, again, is perfectly legal because a list is an iterable. So it allows me to go through them. This one down here converts them to lower. So it takes these uppercase values, right, and then converts them to lower, and then appends them to this list called H2L. Okay? So those are pretty straightforward as we go through. Now, we can get a little more complex and add multiple fors, right? Multiple loops. What this is going to do is this is going to go through a range 2 through 10 and come up with essentially numbers that are not going to be prime numbers. So these are going to be numbers that are technically multiplied or they have the ability to be divided by something other than 1 in themselves. So we have 2 loops here. Now, the way this works is we have our for y equals, right? This is our outer loop, okay? And then this is our inner loop. So the way that would look, if we was to type that out, it would look like this. For y in range 2, 10, okay? For x in range y times 2, 10, and then y. Let's see, no primes dot append x, okay? This right here is what this is doing, okay? It's got our outer loop here, then our inner loop here, and then whatever value x becomes, it's going to then append that to the list. So that's essentially what's happening here. It's just this is more concise. Now, some would argue that this is more confusing. I mean, okay, I get it. You know, I get it. It does take some time to understand how that process works. This is where you play around, play around, play around, change some things, and see what happens. Okay? So like I said, this is basically what this is here. Okay? It's just as you'll notice, it is more concise. 3 lines of code down to 1. Okay? And it's something very common you'll see. All right? So I'm going to dump that out of there because I don't want to confuse when we run this. The next one I've got here, we've introduced an if clause. Okay, we've introduced ourselves an if clause. What we're doing here is we're going to say basically, okay, this is our outer loop. Okay, so we're going to iterate through 2 through 10. And basically, if x is not in no primes, so I have this list up here called no primes. If x is not in that list, then it's going to append x to this list. And the idea is I'm using a list and I'm going to get prime numbers based on something not being in the previous list. It's kind of a weird way to do it, but it's actually pretty straightforward when you stop and think about it. Because up here, I'm getting numbers like 4, 6, 8, 9, so on and so forth, where down here I'm not. Now I will tell you, when this list prints, it's going to look weird, okay? Just bear with me. It's going to look weird, but it does work, okay, to get the prime numbers. But like I said, what this is doing is saying, okay, 4x in range. So essentially what that looks like, if we was to type it the other way, 4x in range, 2 comma 10, if x not in no primes, then we're going to do my primes dot append x. Okay, essentially these two things, right, this and this, are doing the exact same thing. Okay, exact same thing. It's just this is a different way to write it using something called list comprehension. Okay, that's really what it's doing. All right. So let's get rid of that so that there's we don't confuse there. The last one now is a little more difficult to understand. Okay, what we've got here is multiple 4s and an if. All right. So essentially, what's happening here? All right, we've got our outer loop, 4p in range of 2 to 10. Well, then what we got is we're actually going to build a smaller list here, okay? And this is going to be taking p and doing a modulus with d for d in that range 2 to p. So basically, it's taking a look at another program and doing some work with it. It takes actually one of our homework assignments we did, where we did some prime number calculation. There was a way that we could calculate the primes using a for loop, right? So we did something like this: for x in range 2 comma 10. Okay, and then we're going to do a for y in range of 2 to x if x modulus y is x modulus y is equal to 0. At that point, we did a break, if you remember, and then we did else. And then essentially we did a primes dot append x, right? This right here is basically what this is doing. Okay? This is going through and doing this very same thing. Okay? So this is the list comprehension version of this. Now, I know in class we talked about the word all, where you can do if all, and then have the range. This is the way you can do it without all. You just do if 0 not in this, meaning if the modulus isn't equal to 0, then we grab that number, whatever number that would be. So then we take that and append it to this primes list is what's happening. Okay? All right, so I'm going to delete this out. If you'd like to have that in there, go ahead and pause the video and take that. I'll give you a second. All right. So I'm going to take it out of there because I don't want to confuse anybody. All right, so we're going to run this and take a look at how all of these lists work. So we'll go up here to run. Yeah, we'll save it. And here we go. So you can see the first one, we'll just kind of do a little comparison here, right? The first one's a number list. We said there to do for x in range 10, and that's what this one did. The second one we did the squares, right? So those all should line up correctly. A, B, and C we converted to lowercase. A, B, and C, or I'm sorry, A, B, C to upper, then A, B, C to lower. Here, you notice, like I said, this is one with no primes. Notice you got 4, 6, 8, 6, 9, 8. I know it looks weird, okay? I know it does, but it does pull prime numbers like it's supposed to, okay? And then the last one is the actual generation of prime numbers. All right? So the benefit of doing list comprehension is it does allow you to be more concise when building your list. Now, does that mean it's going to work for everything? No. Should you stop doing for loops to build lists? No. All this is doing is giving you another opportunity to do a little different. You'll see code like this, so I want you to be aware of that. The curriculum actually does talk about this, maybe not to this level here, but it does talk about how you can use list comprehension to make your life easier when working with lists. It's actually a very slick thing to do. Okay? All right, so that is list comprehension. Again, feel free to play around with these a little bit. By all means, mess with them, change some numbers, and look at them and see how that all is impacted by your changing of numbers, changing of the ranges, and things like that. And then, of course, try to create your own. See if you can do one that it shows me cubes instead of squares, or square roots instead of squares, or try to generate a list of odd numbers or even numbers, or see how things like that work using list comprehension. Okay? Because all of that can be done. All of that can be done using list comprehension. All right. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to contact me, shoot me an email, and go from there. If not, I bid you good morning, good afternoon, or good evening.